Hello, I'm John Stevens. I'm the chair of the Federal Trust, and I'm speaking once again with my colleague at the Federal Trust, Brendan Donnelly, about the latest developments regarding the UK and Brexit. Brendan, the news is being absolutely dominated at the moment, obviously, by President Trump and his tariffs and his strategy towards Ukraine, his apparent realignment with Russia. These are enormous changes to the geostrategic position. What does that mean for the UK in particular?
Well, I think it's worth stressing the enormity of these changes in 6 weeks. All the bases on which we thought the post-war world was constructed have been swept away. Um, we thought that territorial disputes in Europe and ideally in the rest of the world were not going to be resolved by violence. Well, Trump is entirely nonchalant about what Putin has done in Ukraine. We thought that free trade was the matrix for the future, the template for the future. Clearly, Trump doesn't believe in that. And he doesn't believe either in the necessity of an American nuclear guarantee for the safety of Western Europe. All these are profound changes. For the United Kingdom, they pose particularly difficult challenges because, on the one hand, the United Kingdom is very much integrated within the intelligence and military and economic system of the United States. But on the other hand, it is a politically very live issue what the relationship should be between the British model of society and the American model of society. During the Brexit referendum, there were a number of people, important people on the referendum on the Leave side, who thought that Brexit would be an opportunity to make the United Kingdom more like the United States in its social and economic model. They kept rather quiet about it because it wasn't something that would have been very popular with the United Kingdom electorate. But now they think they see their chance of battening on, of following in the slipstream of a Trumpite America. The only problem with that is that this unpopularity of Trump and his economic model persists in the British electorate. It's not at all popular in the British electorate to be thinking or to be advocating a more Trump-like United Kingdom. And that's a quandary that the right wing of the British political spectrum, both the Conservatives and Reform in their different ways, are wrestling with.
But surely immediately it's a real problem for the Labour government. And are you surprised that Starmer has been so cautious in this regard? And in particular, that we've had the former governor of the Bank of England, who's now the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Carney, coming over, meeting the King. But there doesn't seem to have been the same support from Downing Street for the position of Canada, which faces, after all, challenges of potential annexation by Mr. Trump's America.
Well, I think there's a parallel between that and the EU reset. Starmer apparently does find it difficult to take difficult decisions. He's better at talking about difficult decisions rather than taking them. And I think that desperately he hopes that the United Kingdom can act as a bridge, act as a mediator between the United States and continental Europe. Now, this possibility for bridge building is shrinking by the day. And I suspect it won't be maintainable for very long. But I think it is Starmer's initial impulse to try and avoid having to choose between Europe and the United States of America. I don't think it's going to succeed, this equivocation, but I think he's still clinging to that hope.
Inasmuch as one can detect any strategy in what the British government is doing at the moment, it is to seek closeness to America on economic matters. I mean, for example, not signing the AI deal in Paris, which was promoted by the French and signed by all other European states, and also to try and create circumstances in which Britain is not hit by tariffs from America in the same way that the EU looks highly likely to be hit by tariffs. But on the defense side, the government is clearly tilting in a European direction, seeking to be part of what is going to be the largest rearmament in Europe since the 1930s, and certainly in support for Ukraine and against, therefore, the policy which is currently being pursued by President Trump, which is to essentially embrace the position of President Putin. So this double track seems to be the strategy. Would you agree with that?
I think they are attempting to pursue a double track, but I don't think it will be sustainable. It's always been an attractive idea to, if you like, moderate Brexiters like Starmer has become, to claim that on the defence side, the United Kingdom had such attractive assets to offer the European Union that the European Union inevitably, in its own interest, would want to seek a privileged relationship with the United Kingdom. It was also attractive to the British political establishment, administrative establishment, that the European Union doesn't have the same direct institutional responsibility for defence matters as it does for trade matters. Ever since the failure of the European defence community in the 1950s, defence and security procurement has been rather a Cinderella of European integration. Well, I don't think that's going to continue. I think that we don't entirely know what's going to be the future security architecture of the European Union. But what we do know is that it will play a central role in the whole of the European security panorama, not least because of the importance of the internal market, the defence-related internal market for European rearmament, from which the United Kingdom will have excluded itself.
Well, precisely. I mean, the scale of this rearmament and the likely knock-on effect it is going to have for the whole of the European economy, particularly in areas like high tech, is so substantial that for Britain to be detached from that is going to be a very serious blow, also given the importance of our own defence industries. And I wonder how this can continue, because it seems very difficult for Britain to insert itself into this rearmament program without some declaration of overall commitment to the European interest. Brexit clearly has tremendously damaged trust between Britain and the Europeans. And trust, of course, is absolutely essential to defence.
Well, it comes back to the issue which is at the heart of many British perceptions of the European Union. The idea that the European Union could simply be an economic arrangement without a political dimension to it. And of course, the political dimension is interwoven inextricably with the economic element in the way the European Union is set up. So as the European Union develops, as I'm sure it will, its defence wing, its defence arm, some of which will be based on the internal market in arms and arms procurement. So the political integration of the European Union will continue. It will become a question of identity, of existential values. And if the United Kingdom demonstratively doesn't share those values of European integration, then that must act as a considerable barrier to full participation in this European rearmament, both economically, technologically, and politically.
Could you conceive a moment coming when it becomes necessary for the British government to say that they regret Brexit, that Brexit was a mistake, and although it may not be possible to rejoin immediately, that would be their long-term intention in order to achieve this level of trust, to draw a line under what has happened over Brexit, and to restore the trust that is necessary for us to participate fully in European defence?
I'm not sure that will be sufficient or plausible within the United Kingdom context. I think it will be a recognition both of failure and incompetence if the government were to say, we recognise that Brexit was a mistake, but there's nothing we can do about it. What would be the point of having such a government? Nor do I think that an indefinite commitment at some point in the future to try to rejoin the European Union would have anything other than a very marginal impact on the UK's relations with the EU.
So you think a much more explicit commitment to rejoin is going to become
Yes,
necessary?
and I think it's possible. It's possible that in the turbulent and uncertain times in which we live, when we come to the next election, there may well be in the Labour manifesto something that is much more robust in the way of commitment to the European Union. Perhaps an attempt, which I'm not sure if it will be successful, but perhaps an attempt to join the single market, to join the customs union, to have something much more like the Swiss relationship with the European Union. Once again, I think questionable whether it's achievable, but it would mark intellectually and politically a very important step back towards Europe.
But would a relationship such as the Swiss now have under these new agreements that they haven't yet been approved by referendums, but which have been negotiated, would that be sufficient for a country the scale of Britain in order to participate fully in European defence, the structures that are being considered, and the scale, above all, of the rearmament that is underway? I mean, must have my doubts about that, because
Yes,
Britain is a very different country from Switzerland.
but the only way in which this country can fully participate is through rejoining.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the possibility that in 2028, 2029, the Labour Party will be a little shy about rejoining, but will be pointing towards integrative future aspects of the relationship that I suspect might very well morph into a desire to rejoin when their implausibility and impossibility is demonstrated.
But this rearmament is a very fast-moving proposition, and the foundations of it are being laid right now. I must admit I have my doubts whether, without earlier progress than simply looking towards the next general election, in Britain making clear where it feels its fundamental destiny lies, without that, our role in such defense structures is going to be very marginal. And that will do huge economic damage as well as geopolitical damage.
One of the consequences, I think, of Trump's first 6 weeks has been to reveal fissures in the right of British politics. We've rightly been talking about the government, but there are interesting debates going on within the right of British politics, both within the Reform Party and within the Conservative Party. I think that it's entirely possible that the Conservative Party will split in the not too distant future between the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump wing. And the anti-Trump wing, if it forms an entity, an organization of its own, would certainly be less radically Eurosceptic than the pro-Trump wing. And it might be that will give to Starmer a bit more political space to go further, faster in reorienting the United Kingdom towards the European Union. There's no certainty of that. And there is a possibility, a real possibility, that the dysfunction of British politics as far as Europe is concerned will mean that this country will miss the European rearmament bus. All that we can do is point out the likelihood or the fear of that happening, and then it must be for others to take up the cudgels or take up the baton of trying to persuade the Labour government that their own political and certainly the national political interest lies in a reorientation towards Europe. The events of the past 6 weeks have shown how implausible and inadequate, how weak-kneed is the idea of a reset that consists of possibly a youth mobility scheme.
But this could come a lot swifter than simply the timetable towards the next general election, because we face a very significant challenge for the Conservative Party from reform. We have to see how much damage this connection with Trump and with Putin, indeed, has done to the reform cause. I mean, what is your view on that? Has reform been damaged? Is reform likely to be damaged by
yes, I think it is. Yes, I think it is. I think Farage made such a a parade out of his supposedly close relationship with Trump, that it will certainly be a target that he has painted on his back. And also, of course, he's under pressure from within his own party of people who think that he isn't extreme enough. So I don't think that reform is quite the threat to the established order, if you like, that it was seen to be even a couple of months ago. And I think that a very interesting parallel could emerge between Germany and the United Kingdom. If the Conservative Party does split and the Reform wing are the equivalent of AFD, then there will be certainly space for the rest of the political spectrum to erect a firewall against reform, and that might well contribute to the sort of 80% in favour of closer European ties that I think will be necessary if we're to convince our European neighbours to accept us back into the European Union.
Well, of course, Friedrich Merz achieved his success by renouncing effectively the principal pillars of the policy of his predecessor as Christian Democrat leader, Angela Merkel. I mean, her policies were basically being friendly towards Russia, being open on immigration, and being anti-nuclear power. And Herr Merz has come back essentially on the polar opposite of those three propositions. One wonders whether the Conservative Party, or the part that is not tempted to combine with reform or even be subsumed into reform, the part that it doesn't want to do that would be prepared to go so far as to do a 180-degree turn on Brexit, for example, and to say that this was a fundamental error that should be reversed.
Once you've got a split in a party and internal party discipline has broken down to that extent, that the billiard balls or the snooker balls fly everywhere over the table. It's entirely possible that those people in the Conservative Party, very few of them are particularly pro-European, but there are quite a lot who are not as radically and vituperatively anti-European as the Reform wing are, might find it easier to be part of a party where at least a willingness was evinced to consider on their merits proposals for greater European integration.
But the crucial point is that you feel that for Labour to change its position dramatically on Europe, which may be necessary, which it knows is necessary, but is trapped by being in government, actually, particularly vis-a-vis the United States, that it requires the action of opposition parties, the Conservatives perhaps, we haven't discussed the Liberals, but pressure from outside the Labour Party on the Labour Party is what is needed now for any progress to be made on revising the UK's position vis-a-vis Brexit.
Well, the pressure has to come from within and without the Labour Party. And the more points of pressure there are, the better. And if the right-wing point of pressure, saying he's going to betray Brexit, worries him so much, and that is mitigated by a split of the Conservative Party, a split of the right, then obviously it will be easier for him gradually to change tack. I'm not sure it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary, but it would certainly be helpful.
Well, Brendan, that's a very good survey. We'll have to see how future developments play out. Thank you very much for this. We will have similar videos in due course on the same topics.
Thank you very much.